John Hunter Nemechek could be a possible candidate to drive the 45 car in 2023 if Kurt Busch does not return for 2023. And NASCAR responds to Kevin Harvick and Mark Jr.'s comments around the next-gen car parts. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start off paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2022 Renault scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. This one's not as good as Daniel Suarez's scheme that I think he ran earlier this year at, I believe it was Sonoma, if I'm not mistaken, but I still think it looks really solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Texas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kevin Harvick's red 2022 Hunt Brothers Pizza scheme, which is in tribute to Piper, that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. I still like the green a little bit more than the red, but I think the red one looks really solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Texas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joey Gase's 2022 Lopa Donate Life Texas scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. Solid look at paint scheme, in my opinion. I think the colors look really good, and hopefully Joey Gase will have a good run this weekend at Texas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brad Keselowski's 2022 Kings Hawaiian scheme that we're going to be seeing at Las Vegas. Now, I believe this is going to be a $1 million showdown scheme. It's going to be a little bit different than the other Kings Hawaiian schemes that we've seen this year. Honestly, I think this paint scheme looks really solid, and hopefully Brad Keselowski will have a good run in this car at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2022 Maid Aguas Fresca scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas in Hammond. This is a really good looking paint scheme in my opinion. Kyle Sykes has done a really awesome and a really good job on this paint scheme. It looks absolutely incredible, and I am very excited to see this paint scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Timmy Hill's 2022 Units Pink scheme in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month that we are going to be seeing at Talladega next weekend. Honestly, I think the paint scheme looks really good. I love that Timmy Hill scheme, and I hope he'll have a good run in this truck next weekend at Talladega. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Stephen Parsons' 2022 Broken Bow Cabin Lodging scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. Honestly, this paint scheme looks really good. Really excited to see a Stephen Parsons back behind the wheel, and hopefully Stephen will have a really strong run in this car this weekend. It looks really awesome and really good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Texas Motor Speedway. Scott Miller was on Sirius and NASCAR Radio, and Kelly Crandall reported this yesterday, that they are going to be applying resin on the racetrack, and they will also be bringing the tire dragging down as well. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to help Texas Motor Speedway, but hopefully it'll be able to help the racing at Texas, because let's be honest, the racing at Texas Motor Speedway has been really bad, and I don't think the racing has been really good. So hopefully this tire dragging is going to help the racing, but I'm not really sure it's going to help. Hopefully it will, but I think with how much the PJ1 has really stayed in the racetrack, I'm not expecting the racing to be good. I don't think it's going to be really good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, we'll be talking about Kevin Harvick near the end of this episode, but Kevin Harvick currently is selling t-shirts, basically saying crappy-ass parts on the car. Of course, this shirt, we've seen a lot of drivers make really funny and really cool t-shirts. We've also seen Joseph Newgarden release a new Bus Bros t-shirt. Him, of course, Scott McLaughlin's show that they end up doing that they try to put on Netflix. Now Kevin Harvick is going ahead and selling t-shirts as well. This one's definitely going to sell. I think it's really funny, and hopefully Kevin Harvick will be able to sell a lot of t-shirts with this shirt. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Ryan Vargas. As Ryan Vargas revealed that he will not be in the 6 car for JD Motorsports at Texas Homestead in Phoenix due to another driver. The driver who's going to be behind the wheel of that 6 car for those 3 races is going to be Brennan Poole. I really feel terrible for Ryan Vargas. It all comes down to sponsorship and funding, and unfortunately Ryan Vargas does not bring a lot of sponsorship and funding. He hasn't really brought it since he had the TikTok sponsorship. He doesn't really have a lot of sponsorship and funding. Brennan Poole does. And I really think this, though, is a really good opportunity for Brennan Poole to see what he can do. Brennan Poole, in my opinion, He's qualified really well in the cars he's been in. He's been with Mike Harmon Racing, a 52 car, the Glory to God Racing cars and trucks, and he's done really good in those trucks. And I think that he will do very good in this car. I think we'll do very, very good. It's a tough break for Ryan Vargas because I really like Ryan Vargas a lot. But when it comes to the business model, and he understands the business model, and it is very, very unfortunate, but it is what it is. And it's a shame that Brendan Poole's got to drive it, but I like Brendan Poole a lot. So it's a tough break. So I like Ryan Vargas, but same token, same time, I love that Brendan Poole is getting an opportunity to drive this car, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alex LeVay. As Alex LeVay is going to drive the 92 for DGM Racing this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. This will be Alex LeVay's first start in a couple weekends. He's been out of the car the last 2 weeks due to basic sponsorship and funding. I believe he's probably going to finish the season. If not, I think he's only got one last race that he's not going to run. Alex LeVay, very talented driver, has been driving most year for DGM Racing. He'll probably get the best out of the equipment. They're excited to see that they're bringing the 92 back and having Alex LeVay drive the car. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Akinori Ogata. As Akinori Ogata is going to drive the 13th for MBM Motorsports this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. This, I believe, will be Akinori Ogata's 4th or 5th start of the 2022 season in the number 13 car. He's got Mooney's on the car, which is great to see that he's got sponsorship and funding that's willing to help him. I think it's a really cool move to bring him back, and hopefully Akinori Ogata will do really well in the 13 car this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brandon Brown. As Brandon Brown is going to drive the 68 for Brandonville Motorsports this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. He also will be behind the wheel of the 68 car next weekend as well at Talladega Super Speedway. Really good to see Brandon Brown's back in his cars. Every time he's been in the 68 car, he generally runs really, really well. And this is no disrespect to Chris Wright, but I think Brandon Brown is a much better driver than Chris Wright. So it's really exciting to see that Brandon Brown's back behind the wheel, and hopefully Brandon will get the best out of the equipment. I think he will, though, do really well in the 68 car this weekend, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Natalie Decker. As Natalie Decker is going to drive the 43 for Raymond Brothers Racing this weekend at next weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. This will be her first start in a couple weeks. She hasn't really ran a lot this year so far due to sponsorship and funding. She will have a sponsor that was supposed to sponsor, I believe, at Daytona in the Xfinity Series, but it was not approved as CBD sponsorship, and it had to basically be approved by NASCAR, and NASCAR approved the process to get the sponsorship. It's good to see she's back behind the wheel. Hopefully she'll do really, really good. It's good to see her back. And hopefully Natalie Decker will do really well in her truck race with Raymond Brothers. I think she'll probably have to qualify in, considering I would expect that we're probably going to see a lot of entries in the truck series, as by some of the entries we've already seen. Hopefully she'll be able to make the field and have a good chance at doing good in the race if she's able to make the field. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Preece. As Ryan Preece is going to drive a 17 for DGR Racing at Talladega Super Speedway. Not this weekend, next weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Pretty cool to see that Ryan Preece is getting back behind the wheel of DGR Racing equipment. It's also talked that he could potentially race at Homestead for the truck series as well, and might finish it at Phoenix if Taylor Gray is not available to run. Ryan Preece, of course, has been really good this year with DGR Racing, does have a win with the team. I would expect that Ryan Preece will have a shot at winning, considering DGR Racing tends to run really, really well at the truck base. DGR Racing tends to run really, really good at super speedway tracks. Excited to see him back on the wheel, and hopefully he'll do really well with the team next week at Talladega. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Parker Retzlaff. As Parker Retzlaff is going to drive a 02 for Our Motorsports this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. This will be the first start for Parker Retzlaff in a very, very long time, because we talked about this a couple days ago. The Parker Retzlaff have parted ways with RSS Racing, and now will be driving a 02 car. Honestly, this might be a little bit of an upgrade for him, considering I think Parker Retzlaff is a very talented driver. And we've seen how Our Motorsports can do in races. We've seen Jeb Byrne be competitive, and we've seen Anthony Alfredo be competitive in the rides they've had this year. So this is a really good opportunity for Parker Retzlaff, and I think he will do really, really well. I think he'll finish in the top 10, honestly. I know those are really high expectations for Parker, but I think he's going to do really, really good. And I'm excited to see that he'll be behind the wheel of the 02 car this weekend at Texas. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Caden Honeycutt. As Caden Honeycutt is going to drive the 30 for On Point Motorsports for the rest of the season, according to what he said on the Casey Campbell show. Caden Honeycutt's been driving a 30 car for multiple races, 30 truck for multiple races this season. Is getting back behind the wheel for the rest of the season. Caden is a very talented driver, a young driver who's getting a lot of people that really are high on him or giving him a lot of praise. And I think Caden Honeycutt will get the best out of Clement the rest of the year. Very excited that he's getting back behind the wheel for the rest of the year with the 30 team, and hopefully he will do really well in this truck the rest of the season and get the team some good owners points, and maybe he could be the future of the team, considering the future for the 30 team is really up in the air and it's up in question currently at the moment. Hopefully he'll do really well with this team for the rest of the season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Taylor Kyle. As it was announced yesterday that Taylor Kyle announced himself that he'll be stepping down from his post as being the higher up at McLaren. He's been basically the race engineer and the guy who's been calling the shots, basically the crew chief for Paddle Award and IndyCar, and now he'll be stepping down from his post. It's unclear what he'll be doing, where he'll be going. He's leaving McLaren. He's been part of McLaren for 10 years and has helped many drivers at the team win. He's been with them for the last years as a higher up. He's been working the team for years, and it's good to see that. It's unfortunate that he is basically going out of McLaren, considering he's been really successful. He's helped Paddle Award, contend for wins, and contend for championships these last couple of seasons. It is a shame that he's not going to be with the team anymore, but I understand what his decision is. I think he wants to probably spend more time with his family. Hopefully, wherever he is going, hopefully will do really, really well, and I'm really excited to see what his future is in store for him, but I'm not sure where he'll be going in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar. Now, it was reported by Nathan Brown on Monday afternoon that IndyCar is planning to host a 2-day preseason test on February 2nd and 3rd at Thermal Club. This is basically a major course out in Southern California with different types of courses where they can run and test these cars. This is really cool doing a preseason test in California. I wish they were testing Auto Club, considering that track is probably not going to be available after 2023, considering they're going to be converting it to a short track, and Auto Club will not be available for IndyCar because it's going to be basically a half-mile short track. It's really cool that IndyCar's got it somewhere they can go ahead and test, though. The schedule, we're not sure when that is going to be revealed. Other major motorsports have revealed their schedules. NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar is really one of the last major dominoes to fall when it comes to schedule. We're probably going to talk about that when it does get released, whenever it does, and really excited to see if they will be able to have that preseason test at Thermal Club. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about John Hunter Nemechek. As John Hunter Nemechek is going to drive the 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Texas Motor Speedway. I believe this is going to be the last start for John Hunter Nemechek this year, as this is the last of his 4 planned starts in the 18 car this season. John Hunter has been extremely competitive in the select races he's ran. He nearly won at Richmond earlier this year, only to have a bump and run done by Ty Gibbs. He could have won Dover, but I think he had some electrical problems there that took him out of contention. And the other starts he's ran this year has been hit or miss. I think John Hunter will be a threat to win. I think he could defend this win, considering the last time we were here at Texas Motor Speedway in the Xfinity Series, well, last fall race we were here, guess who won that race? John Hunter Nemechek. I think he'll absolutely will be a threat to win in this 18 car. It would not shock me or surprise me. And I think John Hunter Nemechek is going to be a contender to win this weekend in the 18 car. I would not be surprised if he gets it done. Excited, though, to see that he's getting back behind the wheel of the 18 car. I expect him to do really good and expect him to contend for a victory this weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Fortnite and NASCAR. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that NBC is using video game technology behind Fortnite and a next-gen design from Toyota to help educate NASCAR fans on the intricacies of the Gen 7 next-gen car. This is something that's really interesting, that they're using Fortnite mechanics to help educate fans. But, of course, Fortnite, one of the most popular games of the last 5 years. People have played it for a very long time. And it's been like one of the fastest growing games. So if people see that they're using technology of Fortnite, maybe those people who play Fortnite could come over and watch NASCAR. And it's really interesting what NBC has been doing. Now, I know Fortnite also is a very controversial game for other races I'm not going to get into. But I think it's very interesting to see if they're using technologies from the different forums and different video game companies. I think that's something that's extremely exciting, and I think it's really cool they're going ahead and using different types of stuff. I think it's really awesome and really cool to see that they're doing that, in my honest opinion. I think it's really exciting and pretty cool to see. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Cadillac V Series, as their team has been officially built for their GTP lineup, the Grand Touring Performance lineup that they're going to be going ahead and having for next year. So the lineup has been officially revealed, and there's a lot of familiar drivers that are going to be behind the wheel of that. Sebastian Bourdais, Renger van de Zand, Pipo Derani, and Alexander Sims, who have all been associated with the GM brand for the last 2 years, will be part of this team. This is a very, very stout lineup, in my honest opinion. You've got a 4-time IndyCar champion who's also been racing IMSA for the last few years. You've got Renger van de Zand, who's been one of the fastest drivers in IMSA. You've got Pipo Derani, one of the fastest drivers in IMSA. And Alexander Sims, who's won races, I believe, in Formula E, and has also been competing in the Corvette team for the last couple of seasons. I think that this is a very stout lineup that I think is going to be extremely successful in 2023. I cannot wait to see what this lineup is going to have in store, and I'm very excited to see that that is going to be the lineup. I think it's a really strong combination, a really, really awesome lineup, and very excited to see that they've gone ahead and brought that lineup. I think that's a really stout and a really good lineup, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Bristol TV ratings from this past weekend. So multiple reporters have reported on the Bristol TV ratings, and according to them, the Cup race got a 1.776 million viewers. That is down 19% from 2.2 million viewers on NBCSN. Now, the last couple weeks, we've seen major decreases in TV ratings. And why have we been seeing major decreases in TV ratings? I will tell you a couple reasons why. Number one, NASCAR fans are not watching races on Saturday nights anymore, and this is one of the reasons why we are going away from Saturday night races. Another big reason, college football. There's been a lot of college football games going on Saturday nights, and you have a lot of those going on. And a lot of those casual fans are probably going to tune in to college football. If you look at 18-49 demographic, more younger fans are tuning in to college football and football games than they are into NASCAR. Like I said, another big reason we've seen is because we've seen a decrease in ratings because, again, I just explained it. Basically, there are more Sunday races happening. Now, Sunday night races I think could work, but there's a reason why that's happening. Also, USA Network is not a sports network, so I think that's another big contributing factor to why we're seeing the TV ratings down is because of that. People are not tuning into USA Network. I think what is going to save NASCAR probably for the rest of the year is when they go back to NBC. I also think we're still having issues from Daytona where we had to move the race to CNBC, and people forgot that there was racing going on at the time. So I think that's another contributing factor to why we're seeing the ratings down. I think it's definitely really unfortunate the TV ratings are down, but that's what happens when you don't promote your series. You're going to have less people that are going to tune in and less people that are going to watch. It's very, very unfortunate, but it is what it is, and it's really frustrating to see the ratings are down. But there are some factors probably why the ratings are down. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Joe Gibbs Racing. As it was announced on Monday that Joe Gibbs Racing is going to be swapping the pickers for Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin starting this weekend at Texas and will continue for the rest of the season. A lot of people are wondering why this is happening. Well, one big reason. It's not because Kyle Busch is leaving the team. The reason is because Denny Hamlin is still in the playoffs and Kyle Busch is no longer in the playoffs. So what they're doing is they're going to basically go ahead and swap the pickers because Kyle Busch's picker, let's be honest, has been a better picker than Denny Hamlin's. And I think Denny Hamlin will benefit a lot from this. I think one of the biggest issues that Denny Hamlin has had this year is the fact that his pit crew has really struggled this year. Denny Hamlin's had the most penalties of any driver in the Cup Series field, almost 60 penalties so far this season. Now, is Kyle Busch's pit crew up there as one of the ones with the most penalties? Yes. But if you look at the pit stops that Kyle Busch has generally had this year, the pit stops have generally been a lot better for Kyle Busch. So that's why this move is happening. And in my opinion, I think it is a really good move, in my opinion, to go ahead and swap the pickers. Now, if Kyle Busch is in the playoffs, this would not be a conversation. But because Kyle Busch is no longer in the playoffs due to the engine issues he had at Bristol, they decided to go ahead and swap for this weekend. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a good move in my opinion, especially since Kyle Busch is no longer in the playoffs. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to go ahead and talk about JD Motorsports. As while we were talking about the Brennan Poole situation, JD Motorsports also revealed that they are going to be a 3-car team in 2023. And they also confirmed that Bailey Currey is going to be back behind the wheel of the 4-car in 2023 as well. JD Motorsports, I think, is saying a 3-car team. I think they're a 3-car team, or there might be a 4-car team. I can't remember exactly. I think they're still only a 3-car team, so I think they're remaining the same number of cars in their organization for next year. As for Bailey Currey coming back behind the wheel of the 4-car, makes a lot of sense. I think Bailey Currey is an extremely talented driver. I think he's done really good. He's had some really strong races. I look back at Bristol this past weekend where he was running in the top 5 for a lot of that race and could have gotten a top 10 finish in the number 4 car. I think he will do extremely well in that car. As for the other rides, I have no idea who could be behind the wheel. Ryan Vargas could be back next year, but it's unclear with his future because he's had sponsorship issues this year. Brennan Poole could be a really good candidate. I think Brennan Poole will be absolutely a great candidate to get behind the wheel. And then, of course, you have other rides that the team currently has at the moment that are really unclear at the moment for JD Motorsports. But they've got some things they do have to evaluate going into 2023. I think JD needs to find a way to bring really good drivers behind the wheel. And I think if they were smart, I would have downsized to a 2-car operation to make your program a lot better. But I will say JD Motorsports being a 3-car team, I hope that they can improve their performances because JD Motorsports has been hit or miss this year. It's no doubt in my mind, though, that that team could do a lot better. And I think that whatever they're going to do, hopefully it fixes some of their issues that they've had this year. So whatever they're doing, hopefully they can fix those problems and get those issues sorted out so that we can see their performance become better, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, it was basically an article that came out yesterday from Dustin Long, and David Wilson was speaking to the media in regards to what happened with Kyle Busch's engine issues. David Wilson is very remorseful about the engine failures that Kyle Busch had, but he has a reason why. It's not because of sabotage. The big reason is because there was instability in the valve train. If you read inside the article Dustin Long has, you can see that there was instability in the valve train that was causing these problems. 2 of the last 3 races of this season, we've seen Kyle Busch have engine troubles. Kyle Busch, while leading the race in Darlington and on the verge of winning Sutter 500 to lock his way into the round of 12, basically, Kyle Busch had an engine failure with around 20 laps to go in the race that took him completely out of contention in that race. Then at Bristol, while contending for a top 5, Kyle Busch had another engine failure that took him out of contention. Now, with the situation in Bristol, I think a lot of teams were having issues there. We saw every manufacturer have some sort of problem, really, besides the Chevys, which is really interesting. But we saw some issues there with the valve train for Kyle Busch, which is why we seen the engine failures. And I think he said it's unacceptable what happened when we took Kyle Busch out of contention. I know a lot of people have been accusing Twitter of sabotaging Kyle Busch on social media. I don't think there really was sabotage here. I personally think there was just some issues with engines. They're going to have issues like this kind of creep up out of nowhere. I understand a lot of Kyle Busch fans being upset and scared about that, but I personally do not think that we were seeing Joe Gibbs Racing or Toyota, for that matter, try to sabotage Kyle Busch. I understand people want to make up conclusions, but at this particular point, I don't think that there was any sabotage to Kyle Busch, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jonathan Hassler. As it was expected, due to a wheel coming off at Bristol, Jonathan Hassler and a couple other crew members, and Graham Sauter and another individual, will be suspended for the next 4 weekends. Now, it's unclear if they're going to appeal the penalties. I don't think they're going to appeal the penalties, but they will be suspended for the next 4 weeks due to a wheel coming off. I think this is the first time since New Hampshire, if I'm not mistaken, where we've seen NASCAR go ahead and hand out penalties. And the reason is because a wheel came off and they didn't really grab it before it got back on. So we knew a suspension was coming. So this means that Ryan Blaney's crew chief, Jonathan Hassler, will be suspended at Texas, Talladega, the Charlotte Roval, and then I believe it's Las Vegas. So the first time that Jonathan Hassler will be back as a crew chief, pending if they do appeal or not, the next time we'll see Jonathan Hassler crew chiefing most likely will be Homestead Miami Speedway in the round of 8. This is a really tough break for Ryan Blaney because Ryan Blaney is in the midst of trying to compete for a championship. But you cannot make mistakes like this. You cannot basically make mistakes and have those moments. Now, I personally think with the situation, I understand this has been a thing all year, but I think that we should have only had 2 race suspensions because I personally think that one of the biggest things is that we shouldn't have, because this is one of the reasons why I was really afraid of the 4 race suspensions because of the single one nut rules and all that. You can see issues with it. And there might have been some problems. We really don't know. And there could have been issues. But I will say that with the rules they have, they understand the rules. I don't agree 100% with the call that NASCAR made, but in my opinion, I guess the rules are rules, and we just have to go ahead and follow them. Tough break right there, but I guess is what the deal is, and that's suspension for 4 weeks for Jonathan Hassler due to wheels coming off. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. Now, we haven't really talked much about AJ Allmendinger's future past 2022, but we had the AMA NASCAR ready at an AMA for the drivers in the round in the NASCAR Xfinity Series Plus. All 12 drivers were involved in that. And AJ responded to a question in regards to maybe going cup racing full-time in 2023. And AJ says he will do whatever Matt Collin wants him to do. And this is involving the Cup Series. So someone asked, would you go back to Cup full-time? And he said, if Matt Collin wants me to go full-time next year, I will absolutely do it. Now, some people have been theorizing on social media, I'm not going to say who, but some people have been theorizing that AJ Allmendinger could go full-time Cup racing in 2023. And there might be some backing behind this. Remember we talked about that Kaulig Racing announcement a few weeks ago? Well, there is a Kaulig fan day that's going to be coming up in about 2 weeks from now. On October the 5th, Kaulig will be having a fans thing where they will basically be revealing a Cup Series driver, some paint schemes, I believe, for 2022, some paint schemes for the end of the season, and they will be having a major Cup announcement that is going to happen as well. Now, when I think about this, AJ Allmendinger, it would make a lot of sense for him to go back to Cup next year, and I will explain why. I think AJ Allmendinger is a really, really good driver still to this day, and he's been really competitive on the road courses as well. And I think he absolutely would be a championship threat and a championship contender with Kaulig Racing next year. I know it sounds crazy, but I think Kaulig Racing has been improving this year, and their road course program this year in Cup has been really, really strong. So I think that AJ would do really, really good. I think he would be extremely solid candidate to go out and try to win a championship for the team. I think it'd be hard because I think still Kaulig has some work to do, but I do think Kaulig Racing would do really good in Cup. And I think that with AJ being full-time next year, it would make a lot of sense, and he'd be able to show what he can do on road courses. I would think he'll get a win or two next year if he does go full-time next year, but we are going to have to wait and see what that announcement is. It could just be an extension for Justin Haley to basically get extended for a couple of years. That could be the big announcement, considering Justin Haley's future really isn't in question at the moment. I think Kaulig wants to keep him long-term. He's really the big reason why Kaulig's in Cup currently at the moment. But I do believe that next year, going to 2023, I think there's a really strong possibility and a really strong chance that AJ will be full-time in Cup. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I would not be shocked and surprised if that is the announcement where AJ is going full-time Cup in 2023. But of course, he's trying to focus on winning a NASCAR Xfinity Series championship. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2023 Formula One schedule, as the 2023 Formula One schedule has been officially revealed. And it's the longest schedule in Formula One history, where it will have 24 races on the Formula One schedule. Let's talk about the schedule. So the season Formula One is going to kick off on the 5th of March at Bahrain. After that, they'll be racing in Saudi Arabia on the 19th of March, followed by Australia for the Australian Grand Prix on the 2nd of April. 2 weeks later, they'll be racing in China for the first time in a few seasons on the 16th of April, followed by racing Azerbaijan a couple weekends later on the 30th of April. After that, we'll be back at Miami on the 7th of May. Then we'll have a 2-week break, and we'll be racing on Emilia-Romagna on the 21st of May, followed by racing at the Monaco GP on the 28th of May. This has already been announced that Monaco will be returning at least through 2025. There have been some questions if Monaco was going to stay on the schedule or not. They'll be there on May 28th. Followed by Spain on the 16th or the 11th of June. Followed by going to Canada on the 8th, actually the 4th for Spain. Then we'll be racing in Canada on the 18th of June. Followed by racing Austria on the 2nd of July. Then we'll be racing in the UK Silverstone on the 9th of July, followed by Hungary on the 23rd of July. Then we'll race at Belgium on the 30th of July, and then we will have the week of the summer break for Formula One. Then we're racing in Netherlands on the 27th of August. Then we'll be in Italy on the 3rd of September, followed by Singapore on the 17th of September. After that, we'll be racing in Japan on the 24th of September. Then we'll be racing at Tara for the first time on the 8th of October. Then we'll be racing at USA, basically at Circuits of the Americas on the 22nd of October, followed by Mexico on the 29th of October. Then we'll be racing in Brazil on the 5th of November. And then 2 weeks later, for the first time, we'll be racing in Las Vegas on the 18th of November, which will be the fourth time in history we'll have a late Saturday night race. And then finally, Abu Dhabi will be on the 26th of November. So there's been some additions, of course, Qatar, Las Vegas, China getting back on the schedule. One track and country will not be racing, and of course, will not be racing in Russia, as we'll no longer be racing in Russia anytime soon. I think the Formula 1 schedule is definitely really, really interesting. For sure, there's a lot of very interesting things around the Formula 1 schedule, and some surprises definitely for sure when it comes to the Formula 1 schedule going into next year. Personally, I'm a little afraid that there could be burnout for Formula 1, but I think with how much demand there is around the schedule, I think there's a lot of positives here. I think we'll see some burnout for sure for some of the people that work in Formula 1. I think there's a lot of Formula 1 fans that I've seen, some that are praising the schedule, but there's a lot on social media, especially right now, that are not praising it and that are criticizing the Formula 1 schedule. I will say, though, that it does make sense for them to have a little bit more on the schedule, considering the fact that there is a ton of demand currently for Formula 1 across the world, especially in the United States. Now, we're not going to see another Formula 1 race in the U.S. anytime soon. Brandon Stowe has come out and publicly said that they're not planning to add another race in Formula 1. But that's one thing to definitely watch for sure, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to the future of the Formula 1 schedules long term. But that is the 2023 Formula 1 schedule. Now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're going to talk about NASCAR's comments in response to Kevin Harvick. Now, it's no secret that Kevin Harvick basically made some really interestingly comments against NASCAR and the next-gen car. Remember back at the Southern 500 a few weeks ago? Well, Kevin Harvick basically said after having his car basically go up in flames, he said and called the car saying it has crappy-ass parts. That's exactly what he said. And we talked about a few minutes ago that basically Kevin Harvick is selling t-shirts. Well, NASCAR actually responded to Kevin Harvick's comments of yesterday on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, where Scott Miller talked about the issues at Bristol, among other things. He says what happened at Bristol was unacceptable, but he also says that this is a learning curve for the next-gen car, and says that there have been some things where they could have done to fix issues, but they have responded to Kevin Harvick giving those specific comments. Now, here's my thoughts on the situation with Kevin Harvick's comments. I understand Kevin Harvick's frustration, but I also want to say this to NASCAR. I personally think that NASCAR could have waited another year to maybe bring the next-gen car out. We have seen a lot of drivers make very critical comments about the next-gen car over the last few months. First, we've had safety problems with this car. The hits are extremely harder. Multiple drivers have talked about how having hard hits. We've had Denny Hamlin say things about it. We've had drivers like Kevin Harvick talk about hits being harder. Christopher Bell, Bubba Wallace, Joey Logano. A lot of drivers have talked about this. Denny Hamlin had to miss a NASCAR Xfinity Series race because of the safety of this car and the hits being harder. Kurt Busch has been sitting out for multiple weeks, and it's unclear if Kurt Busch is going to be back in 2023. It's unclear if he'll be back next year. Not to talk, he'll try to return next year, but we have already a replacement that we're going to talk about here really shortly, who could be a potential candidate to replace Kurt Busch next year if Kurt Busch does not return. We've also had issues with other safety factors, fires, though NASCAR has been able to address those problems. But then, of course, this past weekend at Bristol, we had so many mechanical failures and power steering failures and engine issues. Almost every Toyota had either a tire problem or had an engine problem. Ty Gibbs, Bubba Wallace, Mark Truex Jr., Kyle Busch all had power steering issues and engine failures, and they all fell out of the race. Well, Bubba Wallace and Ty Gibbs came back out on track. Well, Ty Gibbs for a little bit, but then they eventually went back to the garage. And then, of course, you had all the Fords have problems, where you had basically every single Ford have a tire issue, including even Brad Keselowski at one point, who was leading at one point. He had problems as well. There have been things about this car, though, that I will say have been really good. I think the racing itself has been solid on the intermediate tracks, but also short track racing. The drivers have been very, very critical of that. We saw a lot of drivers be really critical of the short track package this year, and I do think that there are some things that NASCAR will have to work on. But I will say for some things, I will say that it is a learning process with this next-gen car, and I think it's going to take time for NASCAR to get used to it. It's not going to be perfect right away. I would not be so shocked and surprised if there were issues with the Gen 4 car in the past, and it's probably not a surprise if there were problems with the Gen 4 car. I think NASCAR knows that there are things that they can do better. Now, there are things that NASCAR is going to have to do during the offseason. Like, first, they need to work on the safety. That's absolutely one of the big things that they're going to have to work on, is getting the safety fixed with this car. There are major safety hazards and major issues with this next-gen car that absolutely have got to be fixed, and they need to fix them really quickly and as quick as possible. They do need to fix these issues, and I hope that NASCAR is working on that. But I think NASCAR comments are definitely really, really interesting. And again, it is definitely for sure. I agree with NASCAR that it's going to be a learning process, but they got to get some of these issues fixed as quick as possible. Now, we'll see what happens down the road, but I think NASCAR's comments are definitely very interesting for sure, and they're interesting. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story in today's episode, as we're talking about a potential replacement for Kurt Busch if Kurt Busch is not able to return. Now, obviously, Denny Hamlin and multiple people have said that, and even Richard has said, that they expect that Kurt Busch is going to be back in next year in 2023. However, there is a potential new replacement that could replace Kurt Busch if Kurt Busch is not able to come back maybe sometime this year, or Ty is told to focus on the Xfinity Series. And that is John Hunter Nemechek. John Hunter Nemechek could be the potential candidate for the 45 in 2023 if Kurt cannot return and Team cannot do a deal to buy out Tyler Reddick. Now, obviously, multiple parties have said it, and sometimes things you hear are not absolutely true. We've heard that basically RCR expects that Reddick is going to continue driving for Richard Childress Racing next year, but would not shock me or surprise me because Richard didn't even give details on the charter if Reddick's even going to be back in RCR or not, because Kyle Busch, of course, will be driving a car full-time next year, and basically Kyle's going to be going into Tyler Reddick's team next year, and we already know that Reddick is already going to 23-11 in 2024. That is a potential there. But you also have to think about John Hunter Nemechek. Now, John Hunter Nemechek, I think he's testing maybe today or yesterday, tested at Homestead for 23-11 racing. And it also needs to be noted that John Hunter Nemechek was actually the original person who was going to be the replacement for if any driver at 23-11 had issues. Now, if Bubba Wallace ends up having some issues where he gets like concussion or major issues, he could still be a potential candidate to be a replacement for Kurt Busch or them later this year. But I would think that John Hunter could potentially get some cup starts at some point this season. John Hunter Nemechek, I think, is a very, very talented and a really, really good driver. What I've seen from John Hunter Nemechek in the Truck Series this year, he's not been as good as he was last year, but he's already had 2 wins this year and could easily win the Truck Series Championship in 2022. It also needs to be noted that KBM, they're going to be switching over from a Toyota team to a Chevy team next year. So they're going to have to find somewhere to put John Hunter Nemechek next year. Now, a lot of people like myself think more than likely he could end up in an Xfinity Series car at Joe Gibbs Racing next year, and he's getting more starts there. And we already know the 19 car, that's going to be open next year. Brandon Jones, he's going to Junior Motorsports in the 9 car next year. He'll be replacing Noah Gragson in that number 9 car. But I think John Hunter would potentially go there. But I think that there is a very strong possibility that that could happen. Now, obviously, I still think more than likely Kurt Busch is going to come back in 2023. I would anticipate that Kurt Busch will probably be back, but it all depends on the health of Kurt Busch. Does Kurt Busch get medically cleared? We're still waiting on that. Again, everyone expects that Kurt Busch is going to be back next year, but at this point, who knows? And you think of John Hunter's talent as well. John Hunter, I think, is a really good driver who could get it done behind the wheel. We've seen what John Hunter can do in not the best equipment. He had a top team of Front Row Motorsports, and I think 2311 Racing is a much better organization than some of the other organizations. Now, is it possible 2311 does expand to a 3-car team next year? That is a possibility, but if they're going to expand to a 3-car team next year, they are going to have to get another charter. And with the price of charters currently, with them being around $20 million currently at the moment, I don't see it very likely they're going to expand. So if John Hunter end up going to replace Kurt Busch next year, it's probably going to be if Kurt does not return. If he's going to end up at 2311, they're going to have to basically take him out of Kurt Busch out. But Kurt Busch is probably coming back at this point. This one story we're definitely going to be watching for sure to see if we do see John Hunter make a return. But I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think John Hunter's a really, really good driver. He's done really good behind the wheel in the races I've seen him run this year in trucks. He has not ran a Cup start this year, but anytime he's behind the wheel of a Joe Gibbs car, tends to run really, really well. and I think he will get the best out of equipment if he does end up in there. And I think he will actually be, if he does make starts in Cup this year, I think he'll actually be a contender for the win. I think 2311 Racing's been getting faster and faster every single week. We've seen Bubba already win with the 45 team, and I think there's a possibility if John Hunter does even make starts this year, I think it could be he would do really, really well. So whatever happens, we'll see if John Hunter does potentially come replacement. I don't know. We'll wait and see what happens, but it sounds like there's a chance that John Hunter could be a potential replacement for Kurt Busch next season. So that is going to be today's Law NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on so you be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links are below over that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think John Hunter will replace Kurt Busch, or do you think Kurt Busch will return? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about NASCAR's comments against Kevin Harvick? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, I think you're going to see a NASCAR silly season update video where we'll be discussing all the silly season news that has happened in the last couple months. And trust me, there's been a lot that's happened in the last couple months. Then on Friday, I should have a NASCAR news video, but I'm not entirely sure yet. And I'm not sure if there is going to be a video on Saturday. Keep your notifications on, though, because there could be a video Saturday. Keep your eyes on that as we get prepared for Texas this weekend. God help me. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.